Hey, 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 welcome everybody. We are so glad to be here for another episode of Jaws Coffee Chat Mental Health Awareness. It is July 10th. Amazing. It is July 10th. We have with us our fearless leader, Miss Jennifer A. Whitaker from Jaws Coffee Chat. And before we get started, we want to give special thanks to a few special people: Lawrence Wingate of Wingate TV, Marcus Hart of Transform U Media, Zach Clayton of the PAC Channel, and Jay Stoyan of the Disability Channel. All these folks are replaying our shows on their platforms, and we could not be more appreciative. So let's hear from Jen. Take it away.
The storm is upon us.
The storm is upon us, huh?
I say that because how I always got just the spur of the moment, right? So, in the last week, talking about like mental health and how we handle different things life throws at us, I have seen what seems like my same family go from happy, productive, working, everything to just we're all falling apart. And you can tell who among us has the best mental health stability, which I have to admit is through coping. Okay. Or talking it over with somebody like a sister or best friend or therapist, somebody that I trust. But you could also see someone like my older sister that is ready to collapse. And with us, this disaster was finding out that our dad is just being put in hospice. He's in his final days. And so my older sister, when she has anxiety and depression like I do, but my little sister and I have PTSD. So I kind of have all three from both. And my little sister was getting worried about having to deal with his belongings, our dad's belongings, and it going to our stepmom, and us never again seeing the stuff that is ours that's at that house, because my dad did not write a will. He did not produce a trust. And we don't even know that he has life insurance. And so he's leaving our stepmother, who's on disability, with give or take a $1,200 income. And she's going to eat up all this debt of his death. His medical and everything else will go in her. And she will lose the house that they bought based off his income, because it's still in debt. So she still has to pay that monthly payment, that the mortgage alone is more than her disability check.
Right.
So then you see where that'd be troublesome, right?
Oh, yeah.
Because now we have somebody's about to get on the streets, and our dad's in process of dying in his final days, that he doesn't even have possibly a week or 2 weeks left of his life.
Right.
He's yellow, his eyes are yellow, his skin's yellow, and I don't know, you can tell that I'm olive instead of white, but my dad was that same kind of color.
Mm-hmm.
But here I've been working with therapists, and I've gone to grief recovery groups and stuff, preparing for this, starting back in October of 2020. That's when I first got the news that he was starting to die. So he's been kind of in that bedridden and very limited situation for 3 years, which he could walk about maybe 5 feet, then he had to sit down. And he'd be huffing and puffing like he just ran.
Yeah.
So you get a gist of how sick he's been. But because of that approximately 3-year period, I had what I believe is God-given grace period to adjust to what my life would be like without him. So there was a grief recovery group I attended with a local church, when I was clearly grieving the loss of him because we believed he was in his final days in October of 2020. We didn't think he was even going to live to the next year to see me after brain surgery when I was seizure free and capable of all these other things.
Right.
We thought the me with seizures was the last he would know. And he had been praying his whole life that he would live long enough to see me one day be seizure free. And I was like, no, I don't want him to go without seeing what he's been praying that he would see before he goes. And so I joined the grief recovery group, and we went over different ways of dealing with different situations and relationships. And one of the things we talked about was drawing a relationship graph. So it's a line straight across. And whatever the positive things associated with that person, experiences or behavior, it could be something you did together. It could be that they gave you a hug when you cried, whatever. But the positive things are pointed up.
Mm-hmm.
The negative things associated with that person, like let's say it's my dad, because that's the person I'm losing now. The negative things go down.
Right.
And it's a timeline of the period that you knew them, birth to death, which in my case would be my birth because I wasn't around before then to know my dad. So my lifetime would be, so technically be the mix of my birth and my dad's death, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's the time period I knew him, beginning to end. So then you look at that graph and you count how many good times and how many bad times there were. And that is like insightful because a lot of people think, I got this horrible dad or I got this horrible mom, and it's like all extreme horrible. And it's like, how many times do you look at that and realize, oh, wow, I didn't realize she did a lot more positive things and she had a lot more positive impacts on my life than I realized because it's one really bad negative just outweighed everything in my mind.
Yep. Negatives always stand out more than the positives.
Right? Even when they're major positives, like graduating from a dream college or something,
Oh, yeah.
still that's a major positive. But like you said, it's the major negatives that really stick around.
Yep.
And so looking at that graph is one way to put in perspective of that somebody. So like when I did that in 2020, we started in October, or maybe it was September of 2020, but I didn't finish until about March or April of 21 because I had somewhere around 8 to 10 weeks that I had my brain surgery in December of 2020, and then 8 to 10 weeks I couldn't even get out of a recliner in my recovery from brain surgery. So that much time interrupted what was a give or take 10-week study. So it took something like 20 weeks or something like that for me to do a 10-week study. And when I returned to the study group the following year, that was after I got released, everybody said they were shocked. I was a different person coming out of surgery than I was that they knew before. And those people are now many of my best friends because they know what I was like with that piece in my brain. To know now some of my really bad behaviors, whether it was cussing, yelling at people, or whatever I did before brain surgery, that was actually a malfunction in my brain and not me as a evil or bad person.
Right.
So I didn't just work through to be ready for this moment now where you don't see me bawling, crying, but I've got a social group. I mean, I already did, but like it's bigger
Mm-hmm.
because they connected with the realization that what I was not really who I was, but was physically issues in my brain not being normal, that certain part.
Right.
So then now I have that social circle, and we've worked together on different studies. And some of them we've talked about making a house. Okay, so the ground has to do your stability, your livelihood. I can't tell you what the walls were, but I think if I remember correctly, they were support, like
Makes sense.
emotional support.
That makes sense.
And the roof is the person you call on anytime you're in need to deal with any kind of problem. Who do you go to for problems?
Right.
Okay. So I heard about that from my best friend. And that's what Miss Famous Big Dog Mayaka told me. And she learned it in her um, counseling of some kind. I don't know exactly what kind of, hers might have been her life coach because she worked a life coach at one point, but whatever kind of counseling it was, they told her about that and the idea of using that to design a support system. So she emailed me that. And then similar, I emailed her stuff that had to do with what I was taught. And basically, it was a two-way street of this is my tool, I'll share it with you, and you share me your tool, and we both get, let's say, 2 loads of resources to work our way through whatever life is throwing at us.
Fantastic.
And I was able to say at that certain point in my life, which I think was either 21 or 22, 2021 or 2022, that that roof was my dad. And as he was on decline and I was drawing it, I said, what in the world am I going to do when my dad is gone? And I can't even tell you who it was, but somebody asked me, well, who, if you didn't have your dad and you can never call or text him again, who would you fall to? And I remember at one point, I said, I don't even know that there is anybody to play that role. I was blind.
Mhm.
So I've started talking about that problem with this circle I had. And even other friends of mine that were in different circles. Because like I've got my coffee group, I
Yep.
got Bible study group, I've got my gym workout group, different groups. And I kind of bounced it around and got opinions of different people. And then one best friend says, I lost my grandmother. I need a roof over my head. Talking about the figure, the
Right.
support system. So we decided we are each other's. So we
That's
text each other or we call each other when we're broken or we're frustrated or we're angry. And whoever's on the listening end says, what else is bothering you? And then vent, 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 vent. And then, is anything else on your mind? Vent, 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 vent. And then we keep going of, okay,
Yeah.
what else is going on? Vent, vent, vent. And then eventually, whoever is the one venting says, oh, I feel much better. Thank you so much.
Yep.
So we give each other like just an ear. That's really what people mean by that, because we're not giving feedback of the problem. We're not arguing with them. We're just listening. And when we can hear they're still frustrated, we ask a question, egging them on to release more.
Yep.
And then we usually end up laughing together, be like, that's out of proportion. I didn't even think it was that big of a deal. You know what? I blew it out of proportion. That was such a simple thing. Why did I never think of such and such? Says whatever we found was a solution.
Right.
And we can laugh at ourselves. But that best friend of mine is the same for me. So when I'm the one frustrated or I'm the one crying, she's one I text or call.
Right.
So in the end, since we were both in need, we were both loving people and best friends, we decided we are that for each other.
Perfect.
I mean, how many people actually realize if you just speak up to tell to whoever that you're comfortable hanging out with, one of them could be that somebody to play that role that replaces someone you're losing.
Yep.
Because whether they realize it or not, many of us kind of take for granted that our parents will always be around. And then when they're gone or they start to get sick and we see them starting to deviate towards death, okay, on decline. Oh, I can't believe it. I'm about to lose my dad or whoever, right?
Right.
Well, until they start to decline in health, we usually don't even think of that. We just take for granted they'll always be here. And, and it's something in our minds as being a child of somebody that we will always have a parent. And then, here I am, 38, losing my dad.
Yep.
That's barely even 65 years old. Not even old enough to retire. And he's in his final days.
Yep.
His brother, my formerly uncle, died at 48. I just found out that my grandmother on my mom's side, that my mom talked about how old her mom got to be, and she was ancient and all that. I
Right.
found out she only lived to be 58 and she died.
Wow.
So she didn't even get to retire.
Yeah.
And she was gone. And can you imagine how my mom feels right now that she's that age?
Yep.
Like, what anxiety does she probably have, right? Because when we see stuff like that in our family, and we have different health conditions, a lot of times we're then going, oh, am I next? Or like, as my mom's responding, she's saying, I told you about how I had to have a female surgery back on May 23rd, right?
Right.
So even so, it was an issue in my ovary, but it was not cancer or anything. And I don't know if I told you how my mom, since she lost her sister to ovarian cancer in January, the time my aunt died,
Right.
that the first thing my mom talks about in March or April, whenever it was that they found out that my cyst was so large, that's why I was possibly being considered for surgery. She's like, go get tested, go get tested. You have cancer. You're about to die just like your aunt.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, I don't have cancer just because I have a cyst. That's how hers started. She died. She died after it was pain right there. Yes, she has cyst, but then she had cancer and it turned into this and this and this, and she's magnifying it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm getting all this stress and pressure. And then we had that tested, and mine turned out to be what they call dermoid, which is where it's hair and other stuff that doesn't belong in the body that's in some kind of ball or not, that is what clogs you up.
Right.
But it's foreign stuff. It's not calcium buildup or whatever other stuff that's like what my aunt had that turns cancerous.
Right.
And I don't know what you think, but I've never heard of hair turning to cancer. So you could get the gist of where she was kind of extreme, because clearly she was traumatized by losing my aunt to ovarian cancer to a point that just because I had something with my ovary, it had to be cancer.
Right.
And I had to be dying too.
Yep. That's trauma.
It is. And so, what a lot of people don't realize is how difficult it is to deal with the mentally ill, because we have such a battle in ourselves. Like me dealing with my PTSD or my anxiety, my depression, all the stuff I go through. But many of us that have those conditions don't have that mom that's also traumatized, where we're on the receiving end too.
Right.
And then, like in my case, since January, now my mom is traumatized. And I find out both my dad is one of the cancers he had before he got to this point was colon polyp that's different cancers, the polyp stuff. And then in the last 3 weeks, my mom's now oldest sister, that's the oldest one alive since the actual oldest passed, she just got a endoscopy, or is it a colonoscopy? The one with the go down the bottom.
Yeah. Colonoscopy.
Correct.
Colonoscopy.
But she just 3 weeks ago got hers, and they found 9 cancerous polyps in her. So now, what do you think my mom's panicking about me having?
Mm-hmm.
So now she's all suddenly, Jen, you got to go get your colon looked into, and you got to get a colonoscopy. 'Cause I think you got cancer. Mom, I've never been diagnosed with it. I've never had issues with my colon. Like,
Yeah.
so there's the stress and that pressure she puts on me. But most of us that have these mental illnesses don't realize we are the one putting that stress on whoever's our loved one.
Mm-hmm.
To understand the reality of why so many people are not patient with the mentally ill, or if they don't have knowledge that the person is not aware and not intending the pressure, but genuinely feels that panic that they are having something medical happen, as opposed to being just a hard to deal with. Some people even label us as evil people, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, well, they're criminals or they're murderers or they're well, but not everybody who has any kind of certain mental illness is a serial murderer or something like that. Like these sociopaths we talk about.
Right.
Okay. But when people don't understand what we're going through, to say guide us into the psychiatrist's office, the therapist, or if we failed to get help and we refuse it, let's say we attempt suicide, then to put us in the mental hospital by calling the police and they'll force us in by court order to get balanced and then so forth, right?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people don't realize what they could do by those few steps. And it's whether that they don't know how to go about helping the person, or it's that they don't have the skills or background or awareness of mental health to realize that person's having an episode of some kind of mental illness, and it's not just right straight out evil, putting all this pressure on me and getting mad. Did you say sometimes go mad?
Mm-hmm.
If people are not aware of that, then that's actually one of our problems as a society, at least in the US, is somebody's judgmental because they don't understand that that person's having something that is basically medical, but under its own category of mental health.
Right. They jump to
And I don't
conclusion.
know how, yeah, and I don't know how many of us actually realize how we are to other people. That's now where, like, I regularly have a lot more stress now at home because I'm not just dealing with my own emotions that have those kind of chaos, but I'm in somewhat ways victimized of someone else's episodes just because of how panicked, if not paranoid, my mom gets of if somebody in the family has it, I must have it.
Mm-hmm.
Jen's the one that has the most illnesses. So if anybody's got it, it's Jen. I mean, my sisters work full-time jobs, unlike me that's only able to work part-time. Both of my sisters work full-time jobs. One's in law school, and is next summer being sent to the White House, where the president is. She'll be working with the president as a student. And, my older sister as a physical therapist, and their spouses as these other high up, good money making careers. My whole family was 6-figure incomes each person. I mean, and here I am, the one that can only work very part time.
Right.
Well, so I'm the one that the health takes the biggest toll on. But then, like my sister and I were talking about, my older sister, the one that supposedly is the one dealing with the biggest stress and the most emotional reaction to the news about our dad.
Mm-hmm.
She was quick to judge me because I got irritable with somebody in the family. And what she didn't realize is the receiving end and all the stress I'm under. And I told her I was stressed, but the thing is, she's not the one that spends every day with our parents to have that pressure from outside that if somebody in the family has it, I must have it.
Right.
So when she was quick to judge me, she didn't see what I go through. That's why I complain. I'm like, Sissy, I'm stressed. Okay, I can't take all this. What do you mean you're stressed? You only work 6 hours a week. You got the easy life. She even accused me. She said, you got a cozy life. So what are you doing complaining about all you go through? I said, since when does spending every day at 2 to 3 doctor's appointments sound like a cozy life to you? I mean, and then I went on and I said, how about you go to a hospital for 8 hours to be operated on and then sit in that one place for 10 weeks and tell me if it's a cozy life?
What's the saying? Grass is always greener on the other side. No matter what,
Right.
somebody else has always got it better. Yeah. Until you carry their cross.
And then those of us who are truly disabled, people don't realize how much we go through. Like what I was saying is 3 doctor appointments a day, Monday through Friday. They don't realize.
Okay.
Sorry, my phone just rang. But they don't realize how much we have to deal with between like me now seeing 15 doctors, okay, for what I found out was my scoliosis. The reason I, for my whole life, had back pain and neck pain. Actually, I got scoliosis, and now I'm seeing a chiropractor and I'm seeing a physical therapist for it.
Yep.
And that's just 2 of my providers.
Yeah.
And I got 15 now. So most people don't realize that those of us that are truly disabled and only able to work part-time have that much time we spend in and out of appointments dealing with such a long list of health conditions. That's why we would be unemployed if we were in the workforce, because no one would let you miss, 3 hours a day or 15 hours and still consider you employed.
Yep.
I mean, even if you try to put those 15 hours into 2 days, that would be a part-time job, which then again, being disabled means you cannot hold a full-time job. Doesn't mean you can't hold any job. So then again, if they did hold a job, it'd be 3 days a week and not 5. It would be, say, 20 hours a week and not 40. So that's where a lot of people don't understand is people who are disabled are not people who are just sitting around doing hobbies and having fun while getting a free ride.
Right.
And so there's a lot to be understood about this whole mental health and our regular struggles and all these different angles of life. This where in this case, my sister not understanding, I don't really have it easy. Because would you like to go to all these appointments I go to? Would you like to be on 2 handfuls of pills I take?
Yeah.
Would you like to be stuck where you're at other people's mercy because you can't even drive?
Yeah.
I mean, and that right there eliminated a lot of jobs when I went to file for disability because I don't have transportation.
Yep.
So, and when I said, well, I could Uber, but my stepmom made a point. She said, but I, as an employer with the state and many other legitimate employers do not count Uber or Lyft as reliable transportation. So if it's someone like me that would have to Uber to their workplace, they are written off as not having reliable transportation because it's not their own vehicle that they can drive themselves.
Right.
So that right there, if they would accept Uber, there's a lot more people that could be working. But how many people with say that they have low intellects, they may be able to work full-time at the grocery store bagging or something like that, like probably seeing some of those at the grocery store, or maybe as a cashier or something like that. That's a minimum wage job. Well, but the main reason they were disabled is because they couldn't drive because of that intellectual challenge. It wasn't that they couldn't actually work. And what's to say that there couldn't be an accommodation where the parent calls Uber for them and the parent communicates with the employer that whoever's the on-call boss, shift manager or whoever, calls Uber to that certain address as their home as an accommodation, and that person can sit there spending 4 hours bagging groceries.
Yep.
But then again, that would have to come to the reality of Social Security accepting, and employers, especially employers have to do it first before Social Security did, but employers have to accept Uber as a legitimate and reliable transportation source to have that person doing that job with presently the biggest hindrance is they can't even get there.
Right.
But
Yeah.
that goes to say where we do not actually have equality for those who are disabled. Because in that sense, if you have a disability that impairs you from driving, you're eliminated from every job on the market.
Yep. It's sad.
It's sad, but reality. But I mean, there's so many people that have PTSD and other mental health conditions that are in the same boat because of, let's say, it's severe anxiety of they were in a really bad wreck and they're afraid that if they get in their car, they'll relive that wreck again and they'll be dead next time or some other major fear, right?
Right.
You may say it's anxiety, you may say it's paranoia, but whatever you want to call it, it's something mental health that could get in the way of simply driving. And by not driving, there's all these things are listed as that they can't do.
Yep.
And from there, there's only the health to go downward because, well, I can't this and I can't that. I'm just stuck here and this is all I can do.
Mhm.
This is the best I can do. And then especially when we are in that mindset, we can't really cope. Especially if you're someone like me, where you've got a family member that's also putting pressure, where you've got to deal with both the inside and outside of the mental illness.
Yep.
And I find it common based off what different therapists and psychiatrists have told me that typically those who have mental illnesses are not accepted by their family. They're labeled as evil or they're labeled as misbehaving.
Or even just lazy.
Exactly. Like someone with depression, like I think you said you have this too, and I know I have depression, and we're not motivated to get up and do whatever. I mean, whatever it is, nothing will motivate us. And like you said, that's a common one to be labeled as lazy as opposed to understanding there's something actually chemically wrong with the brain.
Yep.
You know, it's not someone just sitting there because it's like if you don't have the drive and motivation, even someone yelling at you is not going to get you to do it,
Mm-mm.
regardless of what the chore is. I mean, because really, if you or I were depressed and we had no motivation because we were deep enough in the hole of depression underground, someone yelling at us, most likely we'd be ready to commit suicide. We wouldn't get up and do whatever they're telling us. And that's another thing that people on the outside don't understand. They judge us and or they can lead to our death by doing something like that then gets us, since we're already so down in the hole and it's so dark of a place that the only thing I can handle is dying. And that whoever, whether they admit or not, was responsible for our death. All because they didn't understand.
Yep.
And you know, they say that there's somewhere up there a tie between deaths associated with DUI and other people who should not be driving is somewhere up there with our national record. I heard this weekend is 320 massive shootings
Right.
for this year. That's almost 2 per day. And they say that vehicle and crime related, like let's say during a chase where the whoever's trying to run away from police or somebody's driving while intoxicated, whatever it is, often those things that have to do with criminal behavior on the street are the most common cause of death. But who, if anybody, you know, gets scared of being on the road like they would say being on in a plane. And not nearly as many deaths come from plane and flights and then crashing as do from vehicles wrecks and going off road. Or for like, say, someone's just too tired
Yeah.
or they're texting while driving. There's more deaths on the street from traffic related than there are from even massive shootings. But a lot of people don't see anything to wonder about or to be afraid of in being behind that wheel.
Yep.
But that says, if you look at those numbers, there is a very realistic cause for so many people to have anxiety about driving.
Oh, yeah.
Do you know anybody that goes through that?
Yeah. Me personally.
Well, I have to admit, when I used to drive before I lost my license because of my seizures, it was a medical revocation, which means my license will be back upon which I did get. But I need to tell the driving department, the DPS or whatever they call them in Texas. But once I tell them that my epileptologist cleared me for medical reasons, and I give them information for them to look up that mine was medically revoked, as opposed to like behavior or DUI or anything,
Mm-hmm.
I will have a driver's license back. And, that's going to be life changing for me.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there was so much more I'll be capable of, and so many places I can go that would cost me $5 in gas, but it'd be $65 one way in an Uber.
Right. Exactly.
I mean, like going to Barnes and Noble, which is, I have to admit, is probably my favorite store, at least for things outside of clothing.
Right.
Maybe it's up there at Bath and Body Works, where that's the only kind of stuff I'll wash myself in. But that one that's the closest to our house is give or take 30 miles towards Houston, from the far west side of town where we live. It's still west of downtown, but it's 30 miles away from us.
Right.
So that's a $65 drive as far as a charge in Uber. And like when my parents take us, we go on weekends or wherever they're not working. Going there and coming home, assuming we didn't make any other stops, is only $5 in gas.
Oh, yeah. If that much.
Well, I mean, I say $5, assuming like $2.50 a gallon, right?
Right.
And that's a little bit more modern day. At least around here, we're around $2.60, $2.70, but that was an easier number to work with.
Yeah.
So say $2.50, it's still that 2 gallons versus that's give or take $5 versus a $65 charge. I mean, so you see where that's a big jump for me.
Oh, yeah.
But there's some people with some conditions, especially in mental health, that can never reach that position because, like, that level in their progress, because of certain conditions, are fully disabling from the ability to drive. Because say that they hallucinate,
Mm-hmm.
so they go driving into a road and alley that doesn't really exist, but it's their hallucination that looks very, very real.
Mm-hmm.
And they think they're staying on the road, but in real life, let's say they're going into the ditch, and then they even go down the river. And I mean, I don't know, but it's not the actual road. But they are convinced that what they see is real.
Oh, yeah.
Those are the kind that usually, as far as I know, never get their license.
Right.
Or if they had it at one point, why, it's permanently revoked. Because there are some conditions, and like say alcoholism, right? If you are already an alcoholic in the house or the apartment or wherever, how would anybody rationally be able to expect you to drive without being intoxicated?
Yep.
And that's why those with DUI typically have permanent revocation of their license, and that they can never get it back.
Yep.
Because like those who are truly alcoholics, are addicted. So they like say that they could go to Alcohol Anonymous and all this other stuff that's help. But I have heard so many cases that the person forget the word they use, but it doesn't mean cured, but that they reach that threshold that they can go without alcohol, which usually involves being on some kind of mental health medication, whether it's mood stabilizers, antipsychotics, antidepressants, whatever. But they reach that certain point, and then they stay at it, and let's say the family member died,
Or
or
some
they
other
lost their job.
stressor. Or some other
Exactly,
stressor.
some kind of stressor, and they go right back to the alcohol.
Yeah.
So that's why they say they never
They're never not an alcoholic. They can be sobriety. They can have sobriety, but they're never not an alcoholic ever again.
Exactly. You only have one chance at that. And once you're an alcoholic, you're always an alcoholic. Even if it's in, like you said, sobriety stage, they still have that medical or mental health
Addiction.
label.
Yeah.
Yeah, because they're still addicted. They may be resisting it and doing well in their battle, but they still have the battle.
Yeah. Lots of good information today.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. That's just a whole lot for us to take in today. But, I hope we leave listeners with ideas to spread for both themselves to understand, to share our show, or where you find us as a podcast as opposed to video, but to even spread the information yourself that this is all stuff we need to understand ourselves and the general public that does not have mental illnesses to make it a better world for both us as those with the illnesses and the others or the people without it who we want to understand us so we can be a better world together.
You never know what shoes other people are walking in. So it's always best to be kind because you don't know what they're dealing with.
Exactly.
All right. Well, I think that does it for our show today. You have any last comments that you want to share? I loved your analogy with the house and the support walls and the roof of, safety and someone to help you and keep you covered. I love that.
I loved it when I heard about it, but it's actually something they use in therapy.
Yeah.
And that's one of the interesting things is that there's so many things like that. There's so many people can love about therapy, but it has a stigma.
You have to get past the stigma of going to therapy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's a wonderful place, and it really does help you, whether it's venting on the therapist because you don't have somebody to talk to at home or wherever else in your life, or it's getting words of wisdom because you're trying to make a decision and you need some guidance, but say you don't have that somebody. Whatever it is that you need another person for something. A lot of people don't realize that therapists can be all of those things.
Mm-hmm.
As they get to know you, they can play more roles. But there's a stigma to it. And some people never find the right therapist for themselves as far as personality fit and other things like that. Or sometimes it's someone who lives, 50 miles from the nearest town and they're not willing to drive that far.
Right.
Or maybe there's only one therapist there and they don't like the certain ones. So they're just, at the end.
Well, if nothing else came out of COVID, there's a lot more telehelp available.
There is. That's what I was going to say. Is that, but they don't know about stuff like called BetterHealth, or is it BetterHelp? You know what I'm talking about? The commercial. That's therapists are like what you're talking about. They're remote.
Yeah.
And they take insurance and everything else. But a lot of people don't realize you can actually do therapy that way.
Yeah.
And that at least the post-pandemic world, insurance is accepted, and also the insurance is willing to pay for it to be done virtually. Yeah. So even if you are that one that's 50 miles from the nearest city or town that only has one therapist, you can still have therapy.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Well,
So
go ahead.
as far as announcements, I just want to let everybody know, if you want to learn more about us, visit jensbooksandmore.com, JENNS books, AND more.com. Be sure to look up books by Jennifer A. Whitaker to find books that I, as the author slash host, write, and or scripts, movie scripts, and all kinds of other stuff, poetry, you name it, I do it. You can also do a search in your favorite podcast app for Jaws Coffee Chat. That's JAWS Coffee Chat, and subscribe to our podcast wherever you find us.
Definitely do that. Once again, special thanks to Lawrence Wingate of Wingate TV, Marcus Hart of Transform U Media, Zach Clayton of the PAC Channel, and Jay Stoyan of the Disability Channel for replaying our shows on their platforms. This has been another JAWS Coffee Chat Mental Health Awareness podcast. Join us again next Monday at 2:30 Central, 3:30 Eastern for our next episode with Jennifer A. Whitaker. Until then, everybody, have a great week, be productive, and enjoy yourselves. Take care, be safe. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Recording stopped.